Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture, one of South Africa's most important platforms for dialogue on global issues. This year, the lecture will be delivered by human rights lawyer and UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese under the theme Enhancing Peace and Global Cooperation. Rising conflicts, growing inequalities, and challenges to international cooperation make the message more urgent than ever. Joining us now is Dr. Mbongiseni Buthelezi, CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, to discuss what this year's lecture aims to achieve and why Mandela's vision for peace and justice remains so relevant today. Dr. Buthelezi, good morning to you and thank you for making time.
Good morning to you, Asanda, and thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Why was this year's theme Enhancing Peace and Global Cooperation chosen, and what message do you hope it sends?
The theme was chosen because we are living in a world that is facing growing conflict, in which we are very concerned about the direction in which the world is going. There's also, as we have seen, a breakdown of multilateralism, with certain powers in the world, especially the United States, not cooperating with others, as has been the case for the last 8 years, especially since the founding of the United Nations. And so we've chosen that theme, building on a speech that Nelson Mandela gave in Malawi in 2003, where he made it quite clear that it is a choice, it is a political choice, either to work with others to reduce conflicts, or not. And he urged the world for people and countries, powers to work together to reduce conflict and to create harmonious ways of living together. We are building on that in a moment when it is quite urgent that peace and cooperation be found in this moment in the world.
How does Mandela's vision for peace guide the foundation in choosing the kind of themes that are covered and speakers?
So most of our work is actually guided by the mandate that Nelson Mandela gave the foundation. And the mandate is to advance peace, democracy, and human rights in the world. It is based on our analysis of where the world is and what is most urgently needed in terms of dialogue, in terms of seeding new ideas, in terms of shifting hearts and minds in the world. And that is how we've chosen this year's theme. It goes on previous year's themes. This is the 23rd lecture that is being hosted since Nelson Mandela himself inaugurated the first one. And today the world is even more urgently in need of dialogue and in need of people finding one another and hearts and minds shifting so that we can work towards peace in the world. And that is what has guided our decision for this year's annual lecture.
Talk to us about the decision to have Francesca Albanese deliver this year's lecture.
Francesca Albanese is a world-respected human rights lawyer who has worked across the United Nations system on issues of human rights, as well as on matters to do with refugees. She's also the UN Special Rapporteur on Palestine at the moment, and that is one of the most urgent and pressing conflicts of our time that I think is going to define the next era of multilateralism in the world. It is then, I think, for us quite apt that that's the person who this year we've invited to South Africa to talk about these pressing matters in the world. The issues that we are seeing don't only affect Palestine. There are issues that affect other places in the world. We're seeing conflicts in Sudan, for example. We're seeing the conflict in Ukraine. And the issues that she is going to speak about finding peace globally, not just in a particular conflict, even though her focus will be on Palestine, and it is an urgent and pressing conflict that we need to bring to an end in the world. But it is that broad scope of talking about conflict, talking about multilateralism, talking about human rights issues that I think we need to recommit to in the world going forward. That's why we've invited Francesca Albanese to give this year's lecture.
Great. How does the foundation ensure the lecture leads to real world impact and it doesn't end at just dialogue level?
So I think on one hand, dialogue is important. The way that we work towards solutions in the world is through dialoguing. And one of the things that Nelson Mandela himself did and did very successfully after he stepped down as president was to convene dialogues. He always said that if you bring people together that agree, it's not a dialogue, it's a chat.
Mm.
But what you need to do is to bring people together who disagree on issues and keep them in a conversation until a constructive way forward is found. And so dialogue, I think, is important on one hand for those, for that reason. But beyond dialogue, what we need to do, of course, is to see action. And dialogue leads sometimes to collective action. What we are seeing in the matter of Palestine, but also in the matters of other conflicts in the world, is that there is a global movement for peace. And that global movement for peace is gaining momentum with things like the recognition of the Palestinian state by various member states of the United Nations that happened at the UN General Assembly this year. There's also a growing momentum in terms of the protests that we're seeing for peace happening in different parts of the world. And that, in part, is something that is encouraged and driven by dialogue. So dialogue, I think, is critical, but that dialogue needs to lead to action. It needs to lead to pressure being put on states. It needs to lead to efforts like the Hague Group, where South Africa has come together with other countries, including Colombia, to push for other states to get involved in trying to stop the conflicts that are happening more urgently than we've seen so far. And it is that kind of momentum that we need to sustain through efforts like the Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture and related events that happen. There will be other engagements that happen around the annual lecture in Johannesburg as well as in Cape Town.
What do you believe? And I'm sure there's a lot of these lessons that we can extract from Mandela's approach to dealing with conflict. But what do you believe are the top lessons that we can take from his approach and those that are going to be most relevant when it comes to today's conflicts?
The important thing, I think, is to find sufficient consensus and to create spaces that are safe enough for difficult conversations to be had. There's never entirely a safe space, but we can create spaces that are safe enough for the hard conversations that need to be had, to be able to shift hearts and minds, to bring together people from across the political spectrum into dialogue, but also to bring together people from across religious persuasions. And so some of the engagements that are going to happen around this lecture are going to include Ms. Albanese meeting with Jewish leaders, meeting with Christian leaders, meeting with Muslim leaders, but also meeting with other groups that have been quite active or activist in calling for peace in Palestine. And I think that's the important thing, is to create those spaces that are safe enough where people who might disagree with one another can find spaces to be in dialogue with one another, and can find spaces to be in dialogue with people that they disagree with. So that's the critical thing about the role of dialogue and the way in which Nelson Mandela taught us how to conduct dialogue, and we continue the work that he started by trying to create those safe enough spaces for voices that disagree to be able to find one another.
Finally, where and when will this 23rd Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture take place? Who can be a part of it as well?
The lecture will take place at Wits University at the Linda Auditorium on the 25th of October. And then 2 days later, on the 27th of October, Albanese will also speak at the University of Cape Town. There will be later this week, tickets will be available. So through our website, nelsonmandela.org, You can be directed to where you can book tickets if you want to attend the lecture in person. But there will also be a live stream because the venue where the lectures will take place, both in Johannesburg and in Cape Town, have quite limited capacity. And we've got overwhelming interest in these lectures. So there'll also be simultaneously a live stream where the details will be available on our website, nelsonmandela.org. For both the Wits University in Johannesburg lecture on the 25th of October, as well as on the 27th of October at the University of Cape Town. Those live streams, anybody can access from anywhere in the world and follow the lecture.
Dr. Buthelezi, we thank you again for your time, and we appreciate you telling us about this and reminding us about the spirit and legacy of our former president in South Africa, Nelson Mandela.
Thank you very much for having us.
Dr. Mbongiseni Buthelezi is CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, sharing insights ahead of the 23rd Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture.